Hello and welcome to our final Wisden Cricket Daily podcast from the India-England series. Rather predictably, given what we've seen over the last couple of tests, England collapsed in an almighty heap on the third day to hand India a massive innings victory and a 4-1 series win. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is Ben Gardner. Mark Butcher will join us later in the show. Ben, that felt very similar to the first innings. Sam writes in to say, it's been another defeat in India, but have we left the tour without the usual questions after a series defeat in India? We usually ask, where can we find some spinners? But we've got three young spinners that whisper it. Looks like they could be quite decent down the line. Our young batters have looked good. I wonder if that root scoop signaled the end of Bazball 1.0. What will Bazball 2.0 look like? I hope England blood some younger players in for the summer. Brook comes in for Bairstow, one of Rue, Robinson or Smith comes in for Folkes. I love Folkes, but he can't bat with a tail and can't see England pushing him higher up the order. I've really enjoyed the series as England did take the fight to India, and 4-1 doesn't necessarily reflect that. I feel like when we come back to India, this side would have matured and who knows, might just beat India. Ben, from an English perspective, how do you think this series should be remembered?
I mean, that I think that's quite a positive spin on it that the emailer said. The big positive is those spinners for sure, and the big sort of what might have been is that middle order of Root, Bairstow, Stokes in particular. I guess you can add Pope in there as well, but those three senior players who won't get many, if any, more chances in India. And like, I know, Root batted nicely today, made that 100 at Ranchi, but they fluffed their lines a bit basically. But then the thing that it's great that they have found these spinners and that they do deserve credit for the talent identification, for the environment that they've brought them into. But you do still kind of look at it and wonder, like, what are their options for development going to be? I mean, with neither of them will be the first choice spinner at their counties. They'll get some overs, but that does tell you that, like, what sort of overs are they going to be? I don't know if I'm feeling quite as positive as that. And I also wonder if, like, as well, England have done better this time than last time they were in India. That is worth saying, even though the scoreline is 4-1 to 3-1. And there were tests that they were in, but I'm also looking at, like, specific players and who are the ones who I felt have got better over the tour or even over the last bit of time. Duckett, maybe there was a question over, like, his quality against the very best attacks, and that has been answered to an extent, and he made that brilliant 100, faded away a bit towards the end, but made some good scores or some good starts, good contributions towards the start. Pope made that brilliant 100, but has really faded away. Crawley's the one that kind of stands out, but you wonder if, like, are the players getting better, or does the environment sort of free them up to sort of play well, but is there enough individual nurturing going on, especially if that
it's risen the
group.
base,
yeah,
but they're not necessarily developing within a series.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think England are still quite a long way away from winning a series in India, and part of that is because as good as those spinners have been, I guess I still worry about everything about the English game means that their opportunities for development are going to be limited. So are we going to be coming to the next series in India and they're looking to pluck some young hopefuls, or even if they're picking these guys again, still basing that on them having not bowled a huge amount in these conditions in that time? I guess I don't know.
No, I think it's right to focus on the middle order. A lot of the pre-series predictions were bleak for England, but that was because of how inexperienced the spinners were. I think if you told people at the start of the series the spinners would go okay, I know that both Hartley and Bashir struggled at times, but they broadly done fine. I think if you knew that before the series, I think you'd expect England to get a little bit closer actually to India, especially an India side that's this inexperienced. And, to put it bluntly, it's been a pretty grim series for those senior batters. Harsha Bogle wondered on commentary whether the defence has been outlawed in the England dressing room. And Duckett and Pope today actually played two shots that looked premeditated on a very good pitch. Pope tried to sweep a ball that was too short to sweep, and Duckett basically Yorked himself. The rationale has been do what works for you. And I've always wondered, well, what happens if your instincts aren't quite right? Bogle put that theory to Stokes, and Stokes sort of defended it by saying, well, when you got spinners as good as Kuldeep, Ashwin and Jadeja, and they've got men around the back, you've got to hit your way out of that. But that plan hasn't really worked for England going back to the second test, really. You know, if you go through the series, Pope had a very, very similar innings ever since the Hyderabad epic. Bairstow played these very fun cameos that almost always ended between 25 and 40. You know, the sort of innings that are great if you're the number 8, but don't make any sort of dent on pitches like these. Stokes has been hopelessly out of nick since Hyderabad, and Root took 3 test matches to get going. You know, a couple of stats for you. Kuldeep Yadav, who didn't play the first test, faced more balls in the series than Bairstow did. He faced more balls for, you know, Kuldeep Yadav is a guy who you wouldn't be surprised if he's batting 10. He faced more balls per innings than every England player this series other than Crawley and Root. And I know there's a big difference between the two bowling attacks, but if you look actually at how some of England's tail enders have batted throughout the series, Hartley's looked reasonably solid pretty much every time he's come in. Robinson got that 58 in his one test appearance of the series, and Bashir, who everyone was talking of him before the series as a proper number 11 in county cricket, actually faced 50 odd 60 balls a test match and only got out once. You know, Stokes whisper it overseas on the last 3 big tours England have had in India. 3 years ago, Australia 2 years ago, and here averaged 25 in India 3 years ago, 23 in Australia 2 years ago, and just under 20 this time round. It's more than 4 years since he's averaged more than 35 on any away tour. Just 100 in that time as well on an extremely flat pitch at Barbados. So yeah, I think the frustration is that middle order, but also it's that they had a plan at the start of the series, and I don't think there was that much evidence that they tried to change that, and when it was really not working for them by the end of it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is this feels like perhaps the most inflexible England have been under Stokes McCullum, and that goes right back to the preparation. You know, we were sort of lauding it after that first Test match because they won it, and because that pitch was the most spin friendly of the series. You know, we had that. Yeah. You spoke to Ollie Robinson, who was talking about that that pre-season camp where they said, you know, the pitches were absolutely spinning, absolutely miles, probably more than anything we've seen in this series. And, you know, they're encouraged, you know, to try things, to play their shots, with the one rule being like, you can't complain if you know, if one just completely gets you, and that instilling that sort of mentality. But that does also show that they were preparing for one type of thing, and they weren't. I almost feel like they weren't really prepared to play flat pitch cricket. And you know, even when you go back to the squad that was selected, we praised, I think, the squad that was picked for the Pakistan tour because it had literally every base covered for any type of team England wanted to pick. Here, the pitches in India, the pitches are actually as more varied in terms of the conditions across different venues, different, you know, different years than anywhere else in the world. And yet it felt like they basically picked a squad that only really allowed them to pick one or two types of team, basically. So you can definitely question that. I think also, yeah, the point that Stokes makes about the defence, one, you're right, is that defending isn't that hard. Also, that sounds like I'm dismissing it. It's still very hard against those guys, but they're very good bowlers. But the point is,
it's possible.
But also they're very good bowlers, so you're going to struggle even more to hit them, right? Kuldeep Yadav is probably the best white ball spin in the world right now. Him or Rashid Khan, I guess. You've got Jadeja, who is, you know, one of the most unhittable white ball spinners in the world, who will not miss a spot. You know, Ashwin is not bad at that as well. Like these are guys who know how to deal with guys coming at them. And, you know, when you talk about Rohit being what he's like as a captain, at least there is a certain amount of, you know, that there was that passage on at Hyderabad where they were a bit frazzled. After that, they actually kept themselves very well. It felt like, I guess, if we're thinking back to maybe the second day at Rajkot, actually, I think people probably felt at the end of day 2 that India hadn't, you know, tried enough, hadn't done enough to disrupt England. But the other way of looking at it is they were like, you know what, we're doing okay here, we'll get our chances. And in the end, that is what was vindicated. So there's some credit needs to go to India for not letting that those periods when England did take the attack to them to actually get under their skin too much. And they did that pretty well, I guess.
Yeah, I felt like India were very calm in the face of England. As the series progressed, they were very calm. They were like, let England do their own thing, push fielders back. Because that's what it was. It wasn't just like India were crowding the back completely. They had men out and actually restricted England's boundary options quite effectively, actually, even when England were looking to go on the attack. There are loads of questions we had in about like potential changes to the England team. This is one from WG Rumble Pants, who asked, what should England do about Ollie Pope, putting that 196 aside? This has been a poor tour for him. He has mostly looked jittery at the crease and has given his wicket away more often than not. Have England shackled themselves to him by making him VC? Is he really a number 3? First of all, I'd say I don't think you can just put the 196 aside. And what I'd say to questions about selection is, if there was a tour to India this time next year, I'm probably not picking a couple of them in the side for that. But this tour is a unique challenge. You know, England won't play a series like this. Ollie Pope not struggling for 4 tests in a row against these 3 spinners in India, I don't think says a lot about his ability to be a number 3 in home test matches or away to South Africa or away to Australia maybe. So it's a difficult one. Pope's obviously got a poor record in India. He's got a poor record against Australia as well. But since he was recalled, since he was number 3, he's got a really good record in home test matches. And he's only played one, as you said the other day, only played really 1.5 tests against Australia. So that would be very harsh to sort of make a decision based on that he's not able to do it against Australia. So with Pope, I'd definitely keep him in the side. He averages 40 odd, if not more, at number 3 since Stokes took over. There's no obvious other candidate. And similarly with the other guys, Bairstow had a good Ashes with the bat, and actually towards the end of the series kept well. I know he didn't keep well at the start of the series, but I think there's a broader question about his suitability to keep at that point, given how recently he'd come back from his injury. So if it was up to me, I'd actually start with the exact same top 7 that played the Ashes. But I understand why people want change. I think there should be change if there was another test against India coming up soon in India, but there isn't.
Yeah. I mean, I think you bang on about Pope, and I guess also the thing is he's still a very interesting cricketer to discuss, even if you can sort of acknowledge that he should be keeping his place, and I guess you want to make sure, that's kind of what I was talking to about the improvement, is that he should feel sure of his place, and that's fine. He should also be, I mean, and he will be, but also like there are just the odd, we talked about it before about his jittiness at the start of his innings, and the fact that he at least outwardly seems sort of comfortable with that he's not doesn't look like he's trying not to be so frenetic at the start, and he should be trying to do that, and this isn't an unusual career progression really. Apart from the fact that England play so many tests means that he's played a few more games that someone this stage has. You have a guy who sort of comes in, sort of takes a little while to find his feet, looks like he does, gets a bit of a setback on a longer tough tour, a few injuries in there. But we know Pope is really talented, and it feels like the career path someone who is going to have like a pretty good career peak basically, and that should come at a pretty good time for England actually, I think, when they have some tough tours. So if he's still got stuff to work on, stuff to improve, but that's fair. But Bairstow, I think there is a little bit more of a question over, and there are a few.
But why is it different?
Well, I think basically because if you're looking at the but because Pope, there's more of an investment to be made there, I guess, and Bairstow, if you look, if you basically, as you say, you're back, like, as much as we talk too much about the Ashes, I think that will be the focus, and I guess it's like you're backing the guys who you think will do well for you there. I guess Bairstow, there's just he batted decently last summer, and he'd just come back from that injury. So I guess
he had a good Ashes.
Yeah.
He averaged 40 against one of the best sides in the world.
Yeah. I guess it's partly the age thing. So he'll be 36 by the end of next winter. Some batters are still very good at 36, but some are not. Some keepers are still very good at 36, but again, some are struggling with their with their bit at that stage. So it's just kind of, I think basically, if there were a keeper to put a really good run together at the start of the summer, I could see there being more of a conversation than there is with Pope. But I would still be starting with both of them, I think, basically.
But I think your broader point on this being a very interesting time for England, I think it's quite important. I think England will privately be wrestling with what to do with the 2024 English summer for a few reasons. England in 2025 have the same stretch of fixtures that ended the Silverwood era. 5 tests at home to India, followed by 5 tests away to Australia. And there's not that much cricket between now and then. I know England have a home summer against West Indies and Sri Lanka, then away tours to New Zealand and Pakistan all this year. England are only a year of Test cricket away from that India home series.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this could be viewed as a good summer to get a few players in if you're thinking about them playing on that Ashes tour. It's a very interesting series against West Indies, because I think England will be strong favourites to win that 3-0, but that's because of West Indies batting at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
West Indies have a very good bowling attack that could still cause England a lot of problems. I'm sure they will. So yeah, it'll be quite interesting on a number of levels how England view that series, not just with the batters, but also the bowlers. Probably not the week to go into it, but you know, they're like, does Potts play? What do you do with Wokes, who's your player of the series in your last home series? But given how he's gone overseas, probably is unlikely to be a part of the plans for Australia in a year or two's time. Anyway, let's hear what Butch thinks of it all. Butch, it's finished 4-1 in the end, which is pretty much in line, and maybe even surpassed a lot of the pre-series expectations and predictions. But with so many players missing for India, I know a few players were missing with England as well, and England spinners actually doing pretty well and probably surpassing expectations. What do you make of how the series finished up?
I think the most disappointing performance, I think, was been saved up for the last one. And India, conversely to that, India's best performance of the series was in the last test. I guess that the most interesting thing has been that the pitches, as similarly happened the last time England were there, they started off on a flat one. England won, and then they changed to the whiz bangers, the Bunsons. This time around, that England won on the pitch that kind of evened the playing field up a bit for our spinners versus theirs, because it turned so much. And then the rest of the series has been played on much more normal Indian style pitches, as far as I can see. And I suppose the disappointing thing mostly has been the lack of application to be able to put even par scores on the board when it hasn't been impossible to bat from England's top order. The tail's done reasonably well, hanging around, batting deliveries. It wasn't as though it was turning so much that the tail enders stood no chance at all. If you were happy enough to sort of sit there and back a bit of defensive technique, you could stay out there and you could make runs. It was not impossible. So, perhaps a little bit of flexibility in terms of the way they were thinking. They went in there expecting it to turn massively. Won the game where it did, and then have not competed, particularly in this last one, not competed on pitches where actually the playing field was pretty level, given how well England spinners have done on relatively flat surfaces.
Do you think England are potentially a bit stubborn? They had a plan that worked in the first Test match, and on different pitches they didn't, as you say, didn't really adapt. And at the end of the game, Stokes was explaining that they were sort of thinking that with India spinners as good as they are, if they're crowding the bat, you sort of need to hit them to get rid of the catches around the bat. And that worked for Pope in Hyderabad. It worked for Duckett in the third Test match. But actually, when it was pretty flat, the middle order in particular really struggled to bat time, really.
Yeah, it kind of it belies a lack of trust in batting any amount of time, really, which is sort of anti Stokes McCullum cricket. However, it may well have served them pretty well to do that. However, but when you look at it, they've picked players who are not going to do that, who are not going to make 5-6 hour Test match hundreds, with the exception of Joe Root. And so, the confounding thing really is that they'd gone out there to play on pitches that were going to be, going to turn heavy from ball one. They won the only Test match where it did that. And have kind of been blown away by standard cricket in India. And I'll tell you what, moving away from England's troubles, in terms of losing the last 4 Test matches, it's wonderful to see India backing themselves to be a bloody good cricket team and play on surfaces that are relatively flat, give their batters a chance to make runs. What wonderful batting we've had from the likes of Jaiswal. And then their spinners go to work where their skill, their superior skill, has to come to the fore in order to get batters out on pitches where it isn't just exploding every other delivery. So, I mean, I'm really happy to see that, because I think they're a fantastic team, and they don't need the conditions to be very, very heavily spin friendly in order to show that.
England have a recent history of really struggling at the end of these quite difficult tours. If you think back to recent Ashes tours and also recent tours of India, the 2016 series, the last test of that in Chennai, Karen Nair scored a 100 and it looked like India would never stop batting.
Yeah.
What's the challenge at the end of these tours? Because I'm actually looking back at the England team around your era, and you guys almost were better in these fifth test matches.
Terrible at the start, though. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure that the comparison, or whether it bears any sort of comparison at all. But one thing I will say is that if you go into a tour not prepared to be sort of spending long periods of time in the host country, the minute you get the chance to disappear off and go somewhere else and relax or do whatever it is that you're doing, you kind of, when the series was over, you've almost checked out, and it's kind of done. And I think the modern player are not used to lengthy tours. It's 5-match test series in the old days used to be 3 months. This one is what, 5 weeks?
It's sort of 8 weeks, but they had 2 10-day breaks.
Yeah, okay.
Well, they weren't even in the country.
8 weeks, but they weren't in India during those breaks. And it's. I'm not gonna, because I don't know what goes on in the heads or inside the people's minds in the dressing room. I wouldn't presume to put thoughts or words into their head. But if you are sort of like looking to jump on the first plane as the moment you get the opportunity, then it's no surprise that you get down to the end there, and you've already checked out and you're on the way back. This is I suppose in modern terms, this is a long tour, I guess. But I think possibly the idea that there are other the next things coming, and you've finished with this one, it's a possible accusation you could lend. Although I wouldn't go heavily on that.
England have quite an interesting home summer coming up, because there's quite a long gap. You've got the T20 World Cup before England next play a test match. They've got 3 tests against West Indies and 3 against Sri Lanka, followed by the same winter they had last year against Pakistan and New Zealand. And then very quickly, you've got the same 10-test stretch that ended the Silverwood era, 5 tests at home to India and 5 tests away to Australia. It feels like if this is the time to... England are almost going to have to pick players for what's to come the year after, if that makes sense. I know the Silverwood era, we talked a lot about not wanting anyone to debut during the Ashes. I'm sure that they're not going to be as strict this time round, but it feels like a few players' careers could go one way or the other, and with such a long break, it sort of leaves time for reflection, and also leaves time for guys not currently in the setup to really press forward their cases. It
certainly does. I think Crawley and Duckett, as an opening partnership, I think they've shown. Zach Crawley's had a terrific series, really. Played really well, and so he and Duckett have done good things, and you expect them to continue that during the summer at home. Ollie Pope, I suppose, might come under a little bit of pressure, as will Johnny Bairstow when Harry Brooks' name appears back on the selection list. And obviously Ben Stokes, having had to work his socks off to get himself back to fitness with a very, very tight schedule for what was a pretty serious knee injury, looked like he was off the pace, really, which is understandable. And also why I'd have had him leave the World Cup a bit earlier to get it done sooner, but that's another story. And then bowling wise, does Jimmy keep going? Jimmy's just gone past 700. It's the most incredible achievement. However, is it time? You cannot see I cannot see him going to Australia. I can't see him being on another Ashes trip. And do England now have to start getting test matches and experience into the likes of Atkinson? Does Robinson have the sort of, the robustness to be the leader of the attack, the sort of the new ball, medium fast swing bowler, and do what Jimmy Anderson has done for all these years, or will there be a bit more of a turnover in that score as well? One thing they have come out of the whole trip with is some spin bowlers, which miracle of miracles have appeared from nowhere. I think they've been handled really well by Ben and Baz. Jeetan Patel has done good work with them, along with Graham Swan popping in every once in a while, and they will be brimming with confidence for the experience and knowledge, and desperate to get back out there and get a ball in their hands, a red ball in their hands, as soon as possible when they get home, weather permitting, and selection in county cricket permitting as well. So it's been a huge bonus, but it has left quite a few question marks around senior players in top order batting positions. And what do we do next in terms of the post Anderson era?
I just wanted to get your thoughts on how those two spinners can be managed in the near future, because you're right, those guys have had decent series. Bashir and Hartley, they will return home as second choice spinners at their county. Lancashire have Nathan Lyon, Somerset have Jack Leach if he regains his fitness for the start of the championship summer. Do you think England almost should insist on being a little bit more interventionist in their management of them, and really insist that these guys are playing cricket? Because they're so inexperienced, and they've both showed a lot of potential, but that potential will only be realised if they play. Yeah,
indeed. I think they can. I think they can insist. I'm not entirely sure that the counties are beholden to do as they say. And weather conditions in April, May, June, when a lot of the county cricket is being played, just might not play ball, and it's a perennial problem. You would hope that if for example, Nathan Lyon is in the way of Hartley or wherever else, that there's an opportunity or cause given for them to go out on loan and play somewhere else that might have a gap, just so that these guys are playing as often as they possibly can. It's a long way to go, waiting for the second, or at least waiting for the test matches, or waiting for the second lot of county championship cricket that starts again, July and September, by which time another 6 months has flashed by, and you've kind of wasted all of that development time. They've showed enough promise, the pair of them, to be playing cricket this summer, and I hope one way or another they can do that.
Well, it was a very exciting series, even though the scoreline was not in England's favour. Cheers for your time, Butch. Catch you next week. For India, Ben, Ashwin was outstanding again, and I feel like criticism of England almost detracts from deserved credit for India. We had a question the other day about, is this the best bowling attack ever for specific conditions, and we concluded probably not, but it's in the conversation. They are just all so good, and Ashwin, the way he sort of changes his game plan depending on where test matches are, depending on conditions. He was talking at the end of the game about how he was bowling slightly differently from different ends, because one end got a little bit more bounce, the other one skidded on a little bit. He's a total professor.
Yeah, and that's what Root was saying before the test. He was because asked about this being Ashwin's 100th test match, and what's the difference between him and Nathan Lyon, the other great off spinner of the era, I guess, and talking about how Ashwin, what you've got to not do is not play the previous ball, because he'll be almost certainly trying to do something different in the next ball, and that he's spends so, like, there's always the subtle tweak and the bit of change in approach, and also the variations that he's got, and he's introducing. At times in his career he's bowled a leg spinner and that sort of thing. And he was brilliant today, and he's grown into the series as well. Struggled a little bit, as some of the other spinners did, and after the first two tests, India's spinners had worse numbers in England, and that's now basically completely flipped. And this was an Ashwin classic really today. And there's also, because everyone loses in India, it then makes each win sort of, you take the sheen off and be like, well, that was expected to happen, but it's expected to happen because India are really good in India. And, and we're just talking about England's stuff at home in the summer. And the one thing that England haven't done is blown teams away at home ever, really. Like they haven't, that's not been a thing
compared to
done.
what the best teams do.
Yeah.
In this era, the best teams generally blow away opposition at home.
But especially compared to what India do. So like Australia, you'd say that they do blow away sides they're better than, but they also, they've lost twice to India. They've lost at home to South Africa in the past 10 years. New Zealand just can't beat Australia. So that's a little hang up they have. Whereas India they don't lose to anyone. And as we also discussed, does a huge disservice to say that's down to the conditions, because you get such a huge variety of conditions.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And Bumrah was also extraordinary this series. I mean, he's had one of his quieter test matches, but still that slower ball, that Yorker to sort of blow away two of the tail was pretty special.
And I feel like their batters also get unfairly dismissed in ways as well. So, you look at someone like Safraz come in, people say because of how he's gone in the IPL, he struggles against a short ball. Didn't look like it this test match when he was hooking Mark Wood for 6. When do you think India will India ever lose a home series?
It's tricky. Yeah, it's like what happens first? Does Test cricket die, or do India lose at home? So
I think a big part of this series, and I don't think England would have come that much closer to winning it, but I think it would have made a difference. Is England basically didn't have an all-rounder for a lot of this series, and Joe Root bowled a lot in the first half of the series, but didn't really bowl much in the second half, and it meant that when it was flat, Hartley and Bashir just had to keep going. They didn't call up another spinner. There wasn't a Will Jacks or Liam Dawson like figure who could sort of change the balance of the side and have one of them up at 7. Like as you talk about that Pakistan tour last year, that was a possibility in Pakistan because they had more all-rounders. Here they just didn't have all-rounders to balance the side and give Stokes more options. Part of the reason why India never lose at home is that Ashwin and Jadeja aren't just two of the great modern day test finger spinners, they also are bloody handy batters, which makes whoever is the India captain, Kohli a few years ago, Sharma now, and actually Jasprit Bumrah was captain in today because Sharma was off the field. The captain just has so many options and they're just so different to each other. They complement each other. India haven't really lost a series since Ashwin and Jadeja played together. The last time they lost a series was Jadeja's debut, and he only debuted in the final test of the series. I think it is not far off impossible to beat India with those two, but the hope other teams will have is once probably Jadeja more than Ashwin actually because of the batting. I can't really see a team challenging them.
Yeah, and because as we discussed on day one, Kuldeep looks ready, I think, to take over that mantle from Ashwin as like a match winner at home in a way that you wondered who that was going to be until not that long ago. Just one thing quickly as well on the bowling and England lacking all rounder. They like Hartley and Bashir did a very creditable job, but you also, and I don't know what England could have done differently, but it is notable that they have seamers who can't but shoulder sort of any sort of significant workload, really. Like you've got Wood, who you have to manage very carefully. You've got Anderson, who's obviously 41. You've got Robinson, who's got his fitness issues. Like, and whereas like Siraj and Bumrah bowled a lot more overs than those two in this test, right? So, and I think even as a percentage, that's just, I think it's just something to note and something they will want to maybe identify for future tours as well. That like you're going to need guys who can get through a lot of overs as well as guys who can sort of strike and that sort of thing. But back to India, yeah. So I guess the question is those two will have to depart the scene at some point. And Akshar Patel has he had that brilliant series against England, but then has done excellent things with the bat, and I guess maybe you say hasn't been required as much with the ball. But I still think Jadeja is a great cricketer, maybe an all-time great cricketer. It's definitely in terms of those numbers, and definitely in home conditions that few would match those throughout history. To expect like guys to be that good is tricky, but Bumrah is again a genius, India's greatest ever fast bowler, and a complete one-off. And actually, they have produced other good to very good fast bowlers, but no one close to that.
Well, I don't think anyone's produce anyone
exactly. Yeah,
like Bumrah.
So you basically they have several all-time great Indian cricketers in that lineup, and we don't yet know for sure that they will be replaced, but the chances are that they will be. And then you're wondering, but then Test cricket's a funny thing, like Sri Lanka win a series in South Africa with one guy playing the greatest innings of all time. That could still happen. There's a team, a 2-test series, like there's a collapse, they scrape a win, and then they accidentally produce a flat one, and then draw or something. Like it
is possible.
It is possible, but I mean.
Well, if England's last 2 tours to India were 2-test series, England would have emerged unbeaten from 2 tours.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, I think the other thing where India deserve a lot of credit, and the system deserves a lot of credit, is that they really do, and we've seen a few things in the last couple of weeks where they've publicly said this, they value the Ranji Trophy really highly. They really make sure that their talented guys are playing that. They punish players that opt out of it. Shreyas Iyer has lost a central contract reportedly because he didn't fancy playing a Ranji game. And you can tell in that the young guys who come in, Dhruv Jadel and Yashasvi Jaiswal, who've made their names for themselves in the IPL. They're both excellent T20 players. They're really good hitters. But they are very adaptable players. They've got really resolute defences. When the going's tough, they're able to withstand very long periods of pressure. And they've got all the shots, which is a terrifying combination for other sides. So if India are producing young players who are this talented, and it's not just talent actually, it's they've got the temperament as well to bat long, and they can take the game away from the opposition. That was what was missing from England. They're able to do one of those things. They weren't really able to do both. If they're producing batters of that quality, they're going to be a real handful on sort of any pitches that they have at home. Yeah,
and then the other thing is how much they value run truth, but also how much they value A cricket and how much that they play. Yeah. Like they play more A cricket than some countries play Test cricket. And so Patidar had a tough series, but the others, they just come in looking sort of totally at ease. And actually, Abhishek Mukherjee wrote an interesting piece looking at just how regimented that selection is actually, and wondering why, say, Sarfraz, who had this phenomenal first-class record, wasn't getting into the team, and it's because he hadn't done it for India A. And as soon as he does it against England Lions, sort of alongside this series, there he is in the squad, he's in the series, and he's ready to do it. Same with Padikkal, same with Patidar, same with Jarrell. Like they have that, like they almost don't pick someone until they make sure they've ticked off every box basically, yeah. But they give them enough opportunity to tick those boxes. That it then means that they're coming in as prepared as you can be. So I guess that's something as well that will stand them in good stead in the future, that they've kind of seemed to have figured that out a bit, I guess. Yeah,
it'll be properly fascinating to see how they go in Australia next year. Australia looking slightly weaker at the moment than they have done at any point in the last couple of years. And obviously India have won the last 2 times. Yeah. They've gone to Australia, and the last time with a B/C team. Root was a joy to watch today. Proper 2021 throwback. Guess it was a shame that it took him 3 tests to get going, because he was brilliant today. And way back first thing in the morning, a genuinely historic moment that will almost be lost given what followed. Jimmy Anderson became the first seamer to 700 test match wickets, just the 3rd bowler overall to do it after Murali and Warne. I had a mate text me this morning saying that it was a shame that it was brought up today on what was otherwise such a crap day for England. Worth saying how ridiculous an achievement it is. Steve Finn on the TNT Sport coverage said, you've just got to saying that he's played Test cricket for 22 years, just saying it out loud reminds you how absurd it is. And of active seamers, only Tim Southey and Mitchell Stark have more than 350, 379 and 358 respectively. So it's safe to say that no one will get close anytime soon. And people love making comparisons. Where does Anderson sit in the all-time list or whatever? And people cite his average of 26.5 as not quite being elite. But I think he's a victim of how early he started, because Anderson, since turning 35, has taken 220 wickets at 22, which is basically Pat Cummins Bumrah level stuff since he turned 35. So I think sometimes that's forgotten just how good he's been. Basically, if you just cut out the first quarter of his career, He'd almost be remembered more fondly in some quarters, I think, if he had 500 wickets at 23 rather than 700 wickets at 26.5.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, and also that speaks to how much he sort of adapted and changed over the years, and how he comes in as a sort of like bit of a tearaway who can sort of swing it, and then changes to being a master of all types of seam bowling, but especially that wobble seam ball, which he's done as much as anyone to sort of make a pretty dominant thing in the game today. But then also, obviously, becomes so accurate and more accurate, and then actually becomes at this stage where he's almost like, apart from what if you're going to question how much he can actually bowl, the overs he can bowl are almost more valuable overseas than they are at home, because
in comparison to what else England have in particular.
Exactly, yeah. Like I think in some ways the spell that proves that, well, maybe if we're looking for a 2-test sequence, there was in the height of the Silverwood era, the end of that Sri Lanka series when he took 6 for 40, I think, in about 30 overs, just bowling like absolutely dry, give nothing away, but with enough probe, enough skill that batters are either getting themselves out or getting out, because there's just nothing else you can do. And then the next test is the first test in India, and the conditions just go in his favour for probably about half an hour, 40 minutes, when it's reverse swinging, and he bowls that over where he gets the two to come miles back in to bowl those two batters, and that just shows how he can do so many different types of things as a fast bowler, and also know when to do which the things they are, and to manage his body even at that age. What feels quite a long time ago, that Sri Lanka tour, when you're still at that point wondering, like, when is Anderson going to call it quits? And he's was able to get through that workload at that age as well, and be whatever the team needs him to be. And you wonder what the last what England would look like over the last how many years without him there, considering how much that conversation been replacing him has been going on, and he's kind of replaced himself in some ways. And who would have been that next Cavan Wood? What records might have, like, how would we view England if that hadn't been the case? And thankfully we haven't had to think about that.
A couple of funny moments today. One, Johnny Bairstow and Shubman Gill had a chat. I thought this was hilarious. So I don't think we covered this on yesterday's pod, but basically Gill and Anderson had a bit of a word with each other just before Anderson got Gill out yesterday. And Gill was asked at the end of play, what was it that was said between the two of you? And Gill said, it would be better for all of us if that conversation is kept quiet. And I'm convinced that Bairstow knows what's said. Anderson has told him. And Bairstow, he goes right by the stumps, and then he asks Gill, what did he say to Jimmy about him retiring? So the whole conversation is picked up on the stump mic. And the conversation goes, Bairstow says, what did you say to Jimmy about him retiring? Gill says, I told him he should retire. Bairstow says, and then he got you out next ball. Gill said, so what? And Bairstow said, what? I got 100. Gill says, how many hundreds do you have this series? And Bairstow, you can tell, is trying to come up with a response and says, how many have you scored, full stop? Which is a bit unfair given that Gill's 24 and seems to be going all right anyway. But yeah, I think Bairstow is the sort of guy who's canny enough to be aware of where the stump mic is, and he wanted to make sure that conversation was made public, I think. And the other funny moment was Bashir trying to review a bowl dismissal. Yeah. He's bowled, the ball ricochets off the stumps into Jarrell's hands behind the stumps. Bashir is unaware that he's bowled, and then he reviews it, and Root just starts laughing, and Bashir turns around and realises that he was indeed bowled.
Yeah, we don't know if it was Joel Wilson as the umpire, and if that was England's just trademark philosophy. But yeah, it was nice to see Root with a smile on his face that point as well. And because actually you said earlier that this felt a lot like the first innings of this test. Actually, I think it just felt like the end of any 5-test tour or 4 or 5 test tour England have played in the last 10 years since that last India tour, basically, right down to Root somehow sort of rising above it all to make a 50 that I guess people won't remember too much, but remind you how good he is at the time. Yeah,
100%. Well, that is everything for today. Cheers, Ben. We'll be back on Monday or Tuesday for a weekly show.